Without further ado then, I'm very excited tonight to introduce and welcome the current BS World Champions. In the names of Frank, Carol and Joe. So thank you so much for agreeing to Dartford through the keyhole, which I think is becoming quite famous now by its name. And so I'd like to start it off with the question, I think, of what you're expecting really. So how it all started, please tell us.
Can I hear that now? Sorry, John, you have to give me a minute while I'm not used to this sort of thing now.
You're listening to that and I'm talking to that. Don't worry about the talking, you're just listening to that.
Okay, John, you're asking me how it all started.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you going back to as far as when I was a boy? Do you want to go back to when I was a lad?
I think so. Sorry, I would. Yeah, yes, please. Yeah. They've got.
Yeah.
Give it to us.
Okay,
and we
well,
to hear where sort of Joe joined you and where Carol came into it.
Right. Okay. Well, I started breeding the budgies when I was 14. A small birdroom in my mum and dad's garden, 12 by 6, with a indoor flight, outdoor flight, and about 16 cages. And I just bred the birds as pets to begin with. As a young lad, just enjoying how to breed the birds, learning my apprenticeship, and moved on to my first exhibition birds when I was 22 years of age. Coming from Tommy Rothery, Tommy Williams, Tommy Lunt of Liverpool. And if your name wasn't Tommy, you'll have no chance. Okay, so in them days, I hadn't shown a bird because basically I didn't start driving till I was around 22. And that's what encouraged me to then go out and visit people to buy birds. I'd only ever use sort of birds from sort of like a cage in Ava, you buy a few pair for £10 or something like that. So I didn't know Carol at that stage, obviously. I bought my first house when I was 24. Moved in, it took me 2 years to put the bedrooms up in the garden the way I wanted them. And then I moved into the house when I was 26. And again, at this stage, Carol wasn't with me. I was living alone. Met Carol when I was about 28 years of age, 29. Got married. Had our first child, being Jamie, my daughter. And at this stage, I kind of moved into showing the birds as a beginner, and probably was just in my early novice days as well, just about then. So Joe was born in 91. And I was when Joe was born, it was my first year as a champion breeder. And we've obviously gone through the intermediate stage by then. Many successes, which we could talk about all night, I suppose. It depends on where you'd like me to start and where you'd like me to stop with it all. Does that give you an introduction to my start with the budgies?
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. Yeah. No, just carry on as long as you want to, you know, telling us your story. And then I've got plenty of questions. You know, if you get stuck of what to say, but yeah, please carry on. It's really interesting just to hear how it all came about, and maybe when Joe came into the hobby with you as well.
Well, okay. I mean, like, really, where we got going with the budgies, I think you have to visit people who are doing quite well with the birds to make a proper step forward. I'd had birds from Eric Lane, which I'd done well with, and a few other breeders like Tommy Williams and Tommy Lunt, etc. But it really got going for us in our sort of second or third year as intermediates. We visited Terry Pilkington, and that was in 1986 when he just won the BS Club Show. And we bought several birds, one being a young grey-green cock, and we paired that to a cinnamon grey-green hen which we bred through Eric Lane birds. And from that pairing, we bred the best birds we ever bred. They were kind of unbeatable and unbelievable at the same time. It just clicked. We like to obviously line breed the birds for fertility reasons. So this pair did really well because they weren't related in any way. Now this pair bred a cinnamon grey-green cock. With the following year, we showed as a young bird. First show was Clwyd Championship, and he was best young bird in show, and also the best opposite sex in show. Jeff Corser had best in show with a cinnamon light green hen. No, sorry, Jeff Bowley, not Jeff Corser. Sorry, Jeff, if you're listening. Jeff Bowley. So the following week, we went to Preston. We showed the same cinnamon grey-green cock, and he did the same. He was best young bird and best opposite sex in show. And Gordon Hallam had best in show with a grey-green hen. So you can see, he was, in them days, the Northwest, and it's still strong in the Northwest, but in them days, we had a lot of super breeders of budgies. And of course, this has entered us into the league of the best breeders at that time. This kind of put us on the map, if you like. Then everyone wants to know how this bird was bred, including Terry Pilkington. So after the Preston show, he came onto the phone, said to me, "How was that cinnamon grey-green cock bred? Where did it come from?" I said, "Well, Terry, last year when we visited you and bought a young grey-green cock, the cock is the father to the cinnamon, and the hen is a cinnamon hen from Eric Lane. So obviously that cock had to be split cinnamon." So he said, "Oh, give me 5 minutes while I go get my book, and I'll look up how it was bred." And he said, "What's the ring number?" I said, 296 of 86. So within a few minutes, he was back on the phone to me. And he says, "That cock that you got from me last year is a full brother to the BS Club Show bird that won Best Young Bird and Best in Show in 86. So we had got ourselves a bargain, if you like, because it was a super bird for the money we paid for it, which was £150 at that time. So we moved on to other birds, other successes with different birds. Any other questions?
Well, maybe, yeah, to do with, yeah, well, what have you, apart, I was going to say, apart from the last 3 years, which are well known, but leading up to that, what have been your show successes leading up to the last 3 years of winning, the BS.
Oh, show successes before the grey who won Young Bird at the club show.
We can include that. And by the way, what would be lovely if maybe Joe at some time could get that grey up and maybe a couple of the progeny off the grey over, babies or even
the birds to show you.
You have?
We've got birds in show cages to show you. Of course
Fantastic.
we have.
Well, we can move on to them a little later. So tell us about.
Let's move on to. Sorry.
Go on, John.
Let's move on then to when Joe started to come into the hobby with me when he was about 12 years of age. Joined as a junior. We built a little bird room for him in the garden, and he could breed his own birds in there. So he went through junior sections, did very well. He had best young bird and CCs and this type of thing, but at the end of the day, he does have an advantage using our stud of birds. So he had successes in beginner, novice, and particularly when he got to his intermediate stage, he had best young bird in show with a sky blue cock at the BS Club Show in 2014. And that basically was his biggest success, I would say. It was our first real success at the BS Club Show itself. That bird went on to win the CC at the club show 2 years later. And if you were at the club show last season, Doncaster, as well as us winning with the grey, as you know, best in show, we won the best sky blue any age in show, and that was a son off the cock that won the Young Bird Award in 2014. So that's sort of the best result Joe had on his own. And then he moved into the partnership with Carol and I. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
well, I've got a question here, and it comes from Nicholas. She says, as a partnership, how does that work? How do you share the responsibilities, i.e. bird room maintenance? Do you all have your own jobs?
To be honest with you, I probably look after most of the repair work. I think Joe would agree, and keep on top of little things that need fixing. But we are all involved, Carol included, in feeding the birds each night. That's Carol's involvement also is tidying the bird rooms up for us, which she does a great job. Joe and I are responsible for pairing the birds up and the main feeding of the birds, checking all the nest boxes, and you probably know we have plenty of them.
Yeah.
So that's our sort of involvement as a threesome. When it's come to breeding, of course, the show season is another thing, getting birds ready for show. Does that answer the question okay, or is there some other part of it you would like to know?
No, that answers that question. Do you breed all year, or do you have a season? Do you slow up or stop breeding for the show season, for instance?
Our main season of breeding starts after the club show in October. We make as many pairs as we can till we reach around 94 pair. Then we'll breed with the 94 cages until around May. And of course, then we've got show season in mind. So we start to split the birds up, particularly in the show cage area, where we need the stock cages for the show team. So a lot of the birds have to be split up. So chicks are moved, eggs are moved, so we can strip things down to look forward to the show season. During that show season, we will be breeding with some birds that have been maybe throwing out some excellent birds. We will keep them going maybe an extra round, move eggs, this type of thing. But when you say, do we breed all year round? I'd probably say the answer is yes. We do have something breeding all year round. Maybe when the height of the shows are on, we may still have 20 or 30 pairs breeding. The reason for that is when you're breeding birds all year round, your birds come into condition and the right age for breeding at different stages. So you have to use the birds when they're ready, not when you're ready. So birds come into conditions at all kinds of different times. So it's something we're keeping an eye on when we're showing the birds as well. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. It's been well documented by yourselves that you've got this project with the TCBs, which I believe, if I'm right, that you've gone down this line with Richard and Michael Miller. Can we ask how that came about and how that's working?
Well, are you asking how we started with Texas Clearbody to begin with?
Yes, please. That'll do to start with.
Okay. Well, 4 years ago, it was my 60th birthday, giving my age away.
Yeah.
5 years ago, was it? Right. Okay. Getting on for 5. Yeah. I'm not 65 till October. Give me a break. We went to Joe Manus, who's a very favourite place of ours to go to. We've probably been to Joe's as many as 14 or 15 times over the years. But one of the birds we brought back was a split, dark green split clear body. And we paired him to a sky blue hen, and he bred 3 clear body blue hens, for which we paired to albino cocks. Our preference was to use red eye because we believed you got a better return of clear body using the red eye, and of course you create the split clear body cocks with the clear body hens. So that's how we've gone down the line. Now we've become good friends with Richard and Michael Miller over the years, and they spotted that we had these clear bodies when they came to see us some years ago. Now probably 3 or 4 maybe. So they've been getting 1 or 2 offers, and they've done very well with them, I think. And we still have a very strong line of clear body, possibly the strongest line in the country at the moment. If you go by our results at the club show, we've won the CC, I think, at every show we've been to with clear body since we started keeping them for 4 years or so. So, okay.
Thank you. While talking about projects and maybe rares, could you tell us what percentage of your cages would you give up to projects?
Oh, okay. Yeah, for rare variety birds, I think is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah, we probably use, I'd say, 30% of the cages are for rare variety birds. And they are being the red eyes, of course. We have Lutino and albino, the clear bodies, yellow faces, spangles. We have some grey wing and any other colour birds, dilutes as we refer to them. We love to have a little go with them. And dominant pieds. We've got a good some good young bird dominant pieds this year. So it's just trying to keep an eye on each of these varieties, just trying to breed a few for the show team. We've always sort of enjoyed having a large variety of birds in the show team. Hence why you'll notice we do win over a lot of CCs at various shows, because we keep all these different birds. Of course, as well as having the normal birds in every colour, in the dark and dark factors as well. We have a very good cinnamon, some opaline cinnamon, and opaline birds themselves. These are big favourites of mine. The cinnamon and opalines always have been. My first CC as a beginner, it came with an opaline sky blue hen, judged by Derek Bowley at the Merseyside Classic many, many years ago now. But I always remember that. And opaline blue and grey have been one of my many favourites, of course, over the years.
Lovely, thank you. Just changing the subject, although you did mention it about outcrosses, can I ask you how many outcrosses that you would bring in each year? And also in that same question, do you inbreed at all? And if so, how close?
Okay, your first question on bringing birds in. We are of the opinion that inbreeding is a very, very big mistake in any form, even cousins. And I'll tell you a little funny story while we're on that subject. My Auntie May said to me years ago, my parents, being my mum's parents as well, of course, said they wanted to marry as first cousins, and they had to get a letter from the Pope for this to be allowed, because for obvious reasons, it weakens the human race if cousins are marrying together all the time. So the Pope has to agree to it. So that tells you a little story why to pair cousins together is not the right thing to do. So we do pair some related birds together unknowingly, but we do our best to pair unrelated birds together as far away as possible. I was taught very, very well by Joe Menace many years ago in my early days as an intermediate. You do not need to inbreed the birds. You create a strong stud of birds with inherent features, and any two birds, when a stud reaches a very, very strong likeness, you can pair any two birds and expect to breed the same type of bird or better. And that's how we've done it for many years on education from Joe Manis himself.
Thank you. So going back to
on the subject of outcrosses, which was the first question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we bring approximately 9 to 12 birds in every year, and it won't be from the same source. We visit different people who have very, very strong lines of very, very good birds. And I'm not necessarily wanting to visit people who have birds that are over buff. My preference is for intermediate feathered birds, because they will breed buff birds whether you like it or not anyway, which are not much good to you for breeding or for showing, but they turn up because it's just a natural progression with budgies to throw these buff type birds out. But we don't want too many of them. It's nice to see an odd one. People love to see them, but they're basically a nuisance in disguise, as I see them. I prefer to breed the intermediate feather birds. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That sort of brings me to a little bit of advice in a way for the beginners in particular. Your thoughts on breeding good birds from lessers, which beginners will have to do unless they've got a very deep pocket. So what's your thoughts there on how to breed good birds from lessers?
You mean from lesser quality birds?
Yes.
I would say as a beginner, you should try and be looked after by your local champion, because you've got a lot to learn. You've got to learn how to breed the birds, to feed them, and you draw your own policies from working with your own set of birds, no matter how good or how poor they are, because you're going to make mistakes. You will learn the best way of doing things, best practice, if you'd like to call it that, as you go on in time with the birds. your ideas will develop. So I'd say if you've gone into the birds and bought birds that are too expensive for you, the likelihood is you won't have been able to take advantage of the money that you've spent. You have to just deal with, as you say, the lesser birds and learn what you're doing to begin with, like I did. I was 14 to 22 before I bought a decent budgie. That was 8 years. I know I'm probably unusual, but I started very early. But this is the best way. Now, once you've done your beginner and novice years, perhaps with the birds, and you should be coming out of your apprenticeship, if you like, and I know a lot of people will be impatient and want to move on very, very quickly. I know this is particularly the case with older people who join the hobby later. But I'd say try and learn what you're doing with the birds and then visit the better breeders and have a, with good money, of course, because you've tried the lesser birds for whatever you've paid, 25, 50 quid. You then want to move into the bracket of birds which are obviously more expensive, but better quality birds to look at. And from breeders who are successful, of course, you've got a better chance of breeding good birds from that type of bird. But you need a little bit of luck along the way.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just thinking.
Sorry, John.
Okay.
Joe wants to say something.
Right, what I'll do, John,
Yeah, I was just about to
Well,
say,
these
we've
are
been
the
half
course,
an hour.
I'll just give you a little, I'll just quote 8 of them there just very quickly because I weren't expecting you to catch, to throw me out like that. So just tell me if this is going wrong. I don't know if this screen's going to work. Can you change it, this screen that's moving?
Do we need George there?
There we go. So these, one sec. So these are just some of the clear body line now. These are our show team birds for next year. There's the hen on the left. She's actually a baby. The screen's just gone off. You flick that back over, George. He's giving me 2 seconds time.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So there's a young hen. She's just about coming through her molt now. She's showing good potential. The one on the right is actually getting nearly a new home. He's going in a swap deal with a good friend. And then the guy on the right here, he's won the CC at most shows for us. He's a 17 ring now, and that's his nestmate brother. These are both bred this year, and they look fit enough to go again, in all honesty. So we wouldn't let them go. And then there's 2 more young birds. My aim this year was to try and breed a clear body violet, and she's the only one. But it's a start. You've got to start somewhere. She'll go to our best violet next year, or the end of this next year, should I say, or this year, to get you some clear body ends and then your splits, and then let the ball roll even further, and that's how you build a project. But the one on the right, he's like ring number 303, so he's literally just gone into the baby flight, which I really like his potential. So is it just a few clear bodies that we've read this year, or the part of the team, going all the way back to that Joe Man's dark green that kind of started it all. It only needs one bird. You need to get lucky, obviously. There's a lot of luck in this game, but it's good to mix into your best birds. If you get a very lesser bird, you're wanting to improve the variety. You've got to make the commitment to be pairing them to your best birds, which obviously this is how we've got to the level of the clear bodies that we have. Seem to show an interest. A lot of people ringing up, have you got any clear bodies for sale? But in all honesty, we don't breed that many. We've made a big attempt this year to obviously fulfill people's requests, but it's not as easy as it sounds. So I'll pass you back on to my dad now, and in the meantime, I'll get a batch of red eyes out.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Back to Frank then.
Back to me again.
Yeah, Frank, while we were looking at those birds, Joe showed us a couple of 17s, the brothers, 17 breds, which are now 3 years old. So some studs have like to have a very young stud, and I just wonder, they must be producing really good chicks for you to carry on using them at that age, unless they're producing just good clear bodies, which is handy to fulfill that sales.
Well, I would say, and this doesn't apply to the clear body, if you've got outstanding birds, and these birds are outstanding for clear body, but we will later show you outstanding birds in other varieties, particularly in normal. And they are, some of those are older than these clear bodies, and they are still breeding some of our best birds. So if you are breeding birds that are prolific and have good longevity, then keep using them. Because who's going to come to you and give you good money for a 3 or 5 year old cock anyway? And they're giving you exactly what you want every year. I say to people, your cocks basically breed till the day they die. They do here anyway. And that is because we don't inbreed. So our birds are stronger for not being bred from inbred birds. Inbreds. I always say to people, when you've inbred your birds, what do you do with those inbred birds? And they then pair them to inbreed them again. So many people have been lost to our hobby because of inbreeding. So this doesn't apply to our birds. We have a spangled blue cock there, and he is 137 of 15. He produces babies every year, and he was best in show at Preston Championship Show last year. And he is now 5 years of age. And he's still, you'll see, we might get him out later if we can find him amongst all the spangles over there. But he is still in very good condition. Longevity and a long breeding cycle is what our birds are known for. Okay.
Thank you. Tony Pringle asks a question here, which is relative, and that's what feature must a bird have for you to keep it?
What feature?
Yeah, or what features in plural?
Well, a bird must, above all, have a good cap. And secondly, a very good mask. In the early days with visiting Joe Manus, I brought back many birds that people said they're too short in the body, but they had super faces. So it was easy. What do you do? We had the super long hens from Eric Lane and Terry Pilkington line. So we paired these short birds off to those birds. And this, incidentally, is how the club show bird was bred in 2017, who has since won 2 best in shows at the club show. So having a face on a budgie is the most important thing on your birds. Shorten the body doesn't bother me, because I can correct that. But you can't work with birds which don't have a face and don't have a cap. All they breed is more birds that are like themselves. If you work with big cap birds, big face birds, your young birds will be very much the same. You'll get slightly longer ones and slightly shorter ones, but they are all worth working with. And of course, I'm talking about cocks and hens. You must have a similar feature in your hens. Now, I know people might say to you, they are cock-headed hens and they won't breed, but that's not the case here. Our hens, because they're line bred and not used in an inbreeding system, our hens breed very well. We always get some, obviously, like everybody, don't lay an egg or basically don't lay enough eggs, but in general, they're quite fertile. So we don't believe in using long birds with no face. That's a waste of time. I could tell you a very funny story there, going back to my Joe Manus days. I went to pick some birds up off Joe many years ago, and he was breeding from a pair of light green birds. And I am looking at these birds, and I says to Joe, "What is happening, Joe? I don't like these birds you have in this cage." He said, "Frank, neither do I. I hate them. I have just swapped Jeff Atwood 2 very, very good birds of mine for these 2 light greens. Because he says, I need birds that are slightly longer." "Okay," he says, "they have the length, but they have no face. I cannot work with this type of bird." He says, "I don't like, as soon as I breed with them, I give them away." He didn't like this type of bird. He said, "I'm doing well without this sort of bird all my life. I don't need them now." So that gives you an example of the best breeder in the world, basically telling me that story convinced me I can work with the short birds as long as they've got the face. Okay?
Yes, thank you. I think, if you don't mind, while Joe's sorting out the birds, we could go back over a little bit and discuss show cage training or preparation for the shows. Can you go through that with us? How, from when, as you're slowing down on your breeding and you start your show preparation?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We basically clear half the cages in our main breeding room for the show team, being adult birds and young birds, of course. We have little show preparation cages in between our main show team cages, which we can spray the birds in. We chase them in, spray them, and we chase them out. And this means we haven't got to catch something like 40 to 60 birds all the time. Our average show team can be 60 to 70 birds with adults and young birds, but we take on average 40 to 45 birds to a show, in the Northwest, that is. Now, when we catch the young birds, that's 8 weeks before the first show. And what we will do, we will take out any broken flights or tails. I do not pull perfectly healthy tails or flights. And the same applies to spots. Spots that look slightly broken, or I'll try them to see if they are loose, and I'll pull them if they appear to be a bit loose, but I never pull a good feather. Only because I'm of the belief if you pull a feather that's just being grown, there is still blood in the follicle of the feather, and you kill the follicle for the next feather growing, and therefore the feather will not grow properly again or never grow again. Okay, so that clears that catching birds and the feather side. But then show preparation with young birds is much harder than with the older birds, because you have to bring the birds out of your stock cages and run them through show cages, look at them, and your mind's eye, looking at all these birds, you've got to decide which ones are the best. And this isn't that easy sometimes. when you've got a number of birds to choose from. And Joe and I sometimes disagree on what we like the best, but usually the best ones come to the fore in the end. Did you want to show them some birds again? Am I okay? Yeah. Okay. And so the young birds, you have to work hard with the young birds. Now, a little tip for you: when you're catching birds from a stock cage, before you put them into a show cage to look at them or train them, always wet the tail in hot water, because they bounce around the cage like silly buggers, to put it mildly, and they break their tails. Now, if you're training a bird, it's most upsetting if it breaks its tail a couple of weeks before your first show. That bird then can't be shown till it regrows the tail, and half the shows have gone by then. So it's very important to do this for me. Wet the tail, just get in the habit, wet the tail, and then put in the show cage before you look at them to train them. Training the babies, oh, now this is something else. If they won't stand on the perch, we turn the cage upside down with some of them. And when the cage upside down, if they still come off the perch, we spray the slanted edge of the show cage and keep spraying it till they decide to get back on the perch, because they don't like water directed at them in that way. So they'll jump back on the perch and hopefully stay there. Now, with very awkward birds, I'd gone to the trouble of filling the show cage full of water, and when they drop down, they don't like that feel of being drowned, as you can imagine. So they quickly jump back up again. You've just got to give them the message: the place to be is on the perch. And eventually, with every bird, no matter who it is, we'll make them stand on that perch, because that's what it's about. If the judge at a show cannot get your birds on the perch, he will not judge you. He can't judge a bird running around the floor. Of course, this produces steadiness in the birds as well, getting them onto the perch. And if you do this every other night, I think is what we do it, as we're feeding the birds, particularly with the birds that show the best promise. You must work hardest with them. Okay, now moving on to the adult birds, of course, they've done it all before, from the year before, and they are so easy to work with. So we don't catch the birds until 6 weeks for the first show. So we've been working with the young birds 2 weeks before the adults, and they are so much easier to get ready. Again, as we catch them, we check it's got to be 6 weeks before, because if a tail is broke, it takes them 6 weeks to grow the new tail. Flights is 4 weeks. So you must look at these things carefully to get your birds right for that first show. And we will normally have a very strong show team for our first show. And what happens is, little things happen to birds when they're at a show. Young birds will still lose a tail as much as you've tried. You will lose a tail out of 1 or 2 of these birds. And if you only had 1 tail to begin with, then you may as well put back in the flight for a while. And when the tail is regrown by about 3 weeks, if they're really top-notch birds, we will recatch them again and put them back in the show cage in the hope of being able to show them at the later shows at the back end of the year. Okay, yeah. Right, Joe's going to show you some rare Lutinos now, and albino, is it? Yeah. Okay, over to you.
Just to add to the point of the show season, it takes a lot of commitment to get the birds in like really top tip condition. So we have like a little, obviously you're talking about how the partnership works. So during the show season, every other morning, well, for the first month, I spray them before I go to work. So I'm in here for about 6:30. And then of a night time, my dad is in charge of like obviously the flights, the spots, and as you get closer to the shows, it becomes every other day. The commitment behind that is then, as when my dad is working through the show scene, me and my mum work through the breeding pairs that are still going and the feeding regime. So But it takes a lot of time and effort, and as you can probably think, training 60 birds to be in show condition is quite tough. So anyway, I'll throw this onto the albinos and lutinos. So these two, the one on, well, your right, or your left as the screen shows, he actually won the CC Young Bird at the club show and finished 5th champion young bird. Now this is his nest mate on the opposite side, who he was getting ready, but unfortunately this little bugger popped the blood quill right before the show. But he is much better bird. It's damn shame we couldn't get him. Couple of adult hens who have bred really well for us. The Lutino went on the left, and obviously the yellow-faced albino is the opposite side. I'm going to show you 3 Lutino cocks next, and she's bred all 3 of these with the Lutino that won the CC adult at the club show, and he unfortunately died about 2 weeks ago. So, but he's bred babies just as good as him. And with yellow-faced albino now, they can be shown in any other colour. Is that right, Dan? Any other colour for yellow-faced albino? Yeah, so she's a high standard for a yellow-faced albino. So these are young birds for this year. There's an albino and a lutino. The albino's a hen, actually. So nice style and blow, and then these two are the other brothers. They're pulling like mad now, but no. Oh, the one on, no. They're in the flight, I mean. But yeah, as you can see, the red eyes, it's becoming quite a strong hold in our aviary at the moment. But literally putting them into the clear bodies has brought them on unbelievable amounts. So if you're looking into that, then that's a route to go down if you don't use it already. Obviously, you need your normal split cocks as well to line breed. That's always a good outcross within your stuff. So there's my dad back.
Thank you, Joe.
That's come off. Oh, that's my glasses. Right, okay. Sorry, bear with me a sec.
Not very technical.
I think I'm hooked up again. I'm all shook up. Reminds me when I'm going on the karaoke, this. Anyway, where are we up to?
Yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah, go on. You got any more to say, or shall I throw a question at you?
Well, did you want to know? Did you want any more about showing? I think I tried to cover it there as quick as I can. Really, there's lots of things you can talk about, of course, but with showing. But I think preparing the birds. It is about spraying the birds regularly, and at those early stages, taking out the broken feathers. That's really what it's about. And then, of course, it's the spotting out of the birds is a bit of a specialty. I find a lot of people can get this wrong. I think I do most of the spotting out, and I use a pair of scissors. I have a pointy pair of scissors. I never pull spots, because what happens is when you pull spots, they immediately start to grow again. And a week or two later, you want this bird for the next show or whatever it is, and it's got this horrible spot to pull it. And if you pull those, some of them will bleed. So that's no good. That's the reason for deciding on which spots you want, leave them in, and cut out the ones you don't want. That's very important for me.
And do you shampoo your birds?
Shampoo, yes. We use Johnson's baby shampoo. I have been known to squirt a bit of Carol's shampoo in now and again, but I can't even remember which one that was. But if I'm short of Johnson's baby shampoo, anything will do. Yeah.
What would be your routine there using the shampoo?
Well, we use lukewarm water, not hot, not cold, lukewarm. And, well, basically a capful into a litre bottle of lukewarm water. And away you go. Shake it up and get it to a fine spray. You don't want to squirt water at the birds and hurt their eyes or something. You've got to do it from a reasonable length away, say 2 or 3 feet, and then you're not hurting the birds with the water.
So you're actually spraying with the shampoo. Do you then, how do you get that shampoo off, or don't you? Do you leave it on?
No, it just kind of, yeah, it drips off, and eventually the birds dry. And yet the first times you use the shampoo, basically, I must admit I have the water a bit hotter to get the dirt off the birds. But as a couple of weeks go on, I'm virtually spraying them with lukewarm to cold water, and again with the shampoo. The shampoo will run off the birds eventually. It doesn't actually go in the feather because the birds are becoming very, very fit. The feathers are becoming shinier and the water tends to just run off them. So, but in them early stages, you need to get the shampoo on them to remove the dirt, particularly with your red-eye birds and some of the birds with white faces. That's particularly important.
And do you find if you've got a particularly dirty bird, will you catch it up and do you use toothbrush or something similar, a shaving brush like some people do?
Yeah, I've been known to use a shaving brush to rub the cap through with a bit of soap and water in it. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I've got different toothbrushes. There you are. Some.
That Carol's?
I used to brush my teeth with that one.
Carol's, is it that one? Yeah.
That type of thing. Yeah, it's useful. Actually, what I find a good toothbrush is for getting the droppings away from the vent area, because they tend to stick and go hard. So if you have a good toothbrush, you don't want to be pulling those feathers away. They're part of the makeup of the bird. So you want to be brushing the droppings away and not pulling them and spoiling the shape of the bird. I've seen birds come to shows and it looks as though they've just left the breeding cage sometimes, because the feather under the vent is part of the budgie and it should be seen and not be missing, if you understand me.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, turning the whole thing round now, I want to talk later on, maybe after the next look at the birds, give you a chance to talk about your feeding regime, which I know is quite big, and that's going to take up some time. But I'd like to get a few more questions in.
Yeah, quite away.
We've talked about your preparation for show. What about your preparation for the breeding season? How does that start?
Well, to be honest, my preparation for next breeding season has already started. I am treating the birds at the moment with 3-in-1 to take away worms. It also treats for trichomonas, and the birds are on that in the flights at this moment in time. And basically, our birds are out in the outside flights, which is very important. They're getting all the fresh air we can give them. The big windows are opened at sort of around 10 in the morning, and they're out there till 6, 7, even 8 o'clock some nights. What we do with the young birds is we put a bowl of seed on the floor in the outside flight to make sure they are getting something to eat. Oh, and we have, yes, Carol's just reminded me, we've got a spray system in the outside flight so the birds can get wet. But that's just manually turned on and off we don't have it on, obviously, on a nasty day, but on a very warm day, the birds can get out there and get wet, and this helps them bring on their feathering. You must get them preening with the preen gland. We have bowls of water on the floor of the outside flights as well, which every day they will take a bath in, or most of them will. I think we have certain birds who don't like going outside, but they all get a chase out now and again to make sure they're having a bath. So this is all part of the lead up to breeding, because the most important thing with your birds to breed well, they have got to be fit, whether they are young or old. If they're not fit, if they're big and fat, they won't breed. You're wasting your time pairing them up. You've got to get them into flights to get the weight off them. The big reason we fly cocks with hens, young birds, is for that very reason. The cocks will chase the hens. If you come to see our birds, you'll see we don't have fat hens and we don't have fat cocks. We have a couple who are overage birds who put a bit of weight on, but certainly birds we expect to breed are not paired up if they're fat. You're just wasting your time. You're wasting a cage, basically. Another thing I like to use as we reach sort of 4 weeks away from the, say, the mid-October, which is when we tend to pair the birds up these days, which is a week or so after the club show, we put the birds on Baytril. This is a solution I buy from my local vet, and it was put onto me by Dr. Baker, who used to be the Budgerigar Society vet, and he said, you give them a month before you pair up, it will clear them of anything they may be carrying. But we've done the worms inside. It doesn't treat for megabacteria, so once a year around the same time, I will treat the birds for megabacteria, and then there's another solution you use after using the megabacteria liquid to sort of wean them off. It sort of helps the digestion to become good again.
We're talking about.
There's quite a number of things I use really leading up to breeding, I suppose, just to get them as fit as I can. Probiotic is another one that's important. You must use probiotic regularly. And again, leading up to breeding, I'll probably be using a bit more of that than normal, because I don't put probiotic in the water when the birds are breeding. So yeah, there's 2 or 3 things there as tips for you if you can get your hands on these things. Does that give a good answer to your question, John?
Yes, thank you. Yes, just while you're talking about your outside flights, are those flights open to the elements, and do you have any concerns about wild birds?
No, the roof of the flight is completely covered. The birds do not get wet by the rain when they're out there. They're out there simply for fresh air purposes. If we want them to get wet, we put our sprinkler system on, or they'll bath in the baths on the floor. But they don't get wet, and there's no access to birds being able to do their droppings into the flights. I would advise against anyone having open flights on the top, but it's okay on the sides. It's highly unlikely you'll get droppings in from wild birds by having the side of your flight open. We do get some wild birds turning up, but they can't attack the birds because our flights are all double wired, 4 inches apart. We use 4x2 on the timber on the outside flight. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Changing the subject, John McDonald's asking questions about feather problems. Now, not saying you've got any, but is there anything? I know we'll probably talk about this when we talk about your feeding regime. Is there anything in particular that you use either in water or in your soft food for getting the feather good, which your birds have got great feather? which is why they
Well,
keep.
yes. One particular thing I recommend, and this goes back to my early days in visiting Germany. Leo Endres, who's still a good friend of mine, who lives in Karlsruhe, he put us onto a powder called murium powder, and you'll see there's a picture of a pigeon on it. This is a pigeon product, and it's produced in Belgium. Now, this is produced for pigeon breeders because they had problems with cysts on wings and flights, and of course pigeons have to fly or they're no good to you. So the pigeon breeders of Europe, the best ones there was, all got together, paid the scientists an awful lot of money to produce this powder, and we have used it for over 20 years more. I've used it as, I can't remember. Yeah, I've been using it since Joe was born, so that must be 30 years now. Anyway, and I do tell everyone I can, anyone who visits me, I tell them about this powder. You mix it with into your soft food. When you've done your soft food, it's the last thing that goes in. And then we add a horse oil at the moment. Which one is it called now? The horse oil we use. Oh yeah, we use Omega oil, which is a NAF product on top these days. I have used cod liver oil with it in the past, and other types of oils, Dexol when I could get it from Videx. Curol oil as well, Murol. They are also Comed products. If you visit the website, you can buy the Comed products on the Comed website. I have got many breeders on it, and they have told me that it's an unbelievable thing that we put them onto. They've had so many less problems with feather since their birds have been on the Comed. It's also good to give them the oil if you want to, but Joe doesn't like the smell of it. It says it makes him sick, so I have to use the NAF equivalent, which is a bit naff, by the way. I've got to get my jokes in, John.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm up for a few jokes, no problem at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, if that's okay for that question, Joe has got some young birds to show you now.
Thank you.
These birds will be 6 months old or so, being babies this year. So I'll just hand you over to Joe again.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
After this look at the birds, maybe we could have a 10-minute tea break, pee break, or whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone go and so have a look at your birds, do whatever, and then we'll just take a 5-10 minute quick break. Yeah.
Sound all right? Yeah, that's cool. So, John, if George can... Well, quite rare for us. We don't breed many dilutes. I know we won the CC at the club show last year, but this is one of his sons showing a bit of potential. It's grey wing or a yellow. Then we've got a cinnamon violet spaniel hen, whose grandparents are miller birds or a miller bird. You've probably seen these if you follow me on Facebook. These are two sister hens out of the same nest. One from round one, and the one with a bit of flecking, she's from round two. This is the brother, the cinnamon dark green. He's not in the best of conditions, but he's a lovely budgie. Cobalt. Very, very young, so he's still molting through. I really like him, nice style. Something different. He's actually grandparent again, he's a miller bird. lovely blow. And then possibly the biggest budgie we've ever bred. Normal grey. He's obviously, as you can see, still molting now. He's the widest cat, probably in the aviary. He's quite
You've been
special.
learning that whistle from the millers, have you?
No, this grey is through our grey line.
No, talk about the whistle.
Oh no, I've always whistled at them.
All right, my joke.
But yeah, he's one of the favourites this year. He does have a tail, which is quite rare when they're that big, but can't complain. Beautiful.
Great perch.
So yeah, there's a handful of the young birds. Rung up to about 580, 558.
I'll tell you what would be really interesting, Joe, while we're having a break.
Yeah.
Maybe that massive grey you got there with a big wide face. How about you picking up a hen that you think might go with it?
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be interesting for the members. I'm sure they'd love to see what you'd pair it to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We don't, when they're that big, we don't really go big to big. Do you want me to get a hen now or after the break?
No, should we go after the break, because it's we've been going well over an hour now. So should we have a quick 5-minute break and go do what you got to do, and we come back in 5-10 minutes.
Cool.
Should we go on to, do you want to do birds again? What are we doing, birds or questions?
Well, you just asked me a previous question of what type of hen we would put the grey to.
Thank you for reminding me.
Say it again.
For anybody that missed it, that big grey cockbird that Joe put up at the end, I asked him if he would put up a hen that he'd be happy to pair it to.
So there he is. And these are the type of hens that we would pair them to. He's actually got a bit of cobalt running through him. His father was a normal grey, but the hen was a cobalt spangle, a grey cobalt spangle, I should say. So this type of hen, slightly blowy, but a nice soft, tight feather on the body, and 2 tails. What's a very typical hen to breed with. Or another option is kind of similar to the same, better spot. Again, 2 tails.
Hang on, Joe. Sorry to interrupt everybody. There is somebody, and I can't find them. One of our members has got their sound on, and it's driving up the wall. So if they could find themselves before I find them.
Yeah, I can hear like a telly.
If they don't cheer themselves up, I'm going to chop their willy off. Rob Hughes, it was you.
Rob Hughes,
Oh,
typical.
Yeah.
It was probably sitting there tickling his belly button eating ice cream.
The screen is black, so he could be doing anything, you know.
Right, I need to go get my charger for my MacBook. It's got low battery. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll speak to Dad. He's gone. Okay. Oh, wine. Oh, yes, please.
Well done, Carol.
Is that your 5th one tonight? You're standing upright still. Oh, we can't hear because of the Joe has got the Joe has got the microphone on him and gone with it, so we can't hear. So.
Yeah, he should have given it to Frank, shouldn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were the 2 type of hens that we would use for that type of cock. But they don't really normally get bred that big here. They like the stylish and showy type birds, but we would never just chuck him out because he's too big. Especially if he's got all his flights and his tails, we would definitely give him a go. And if you did notice, and if Nicky's watching, he was standing on one of her perches, because that's the only one well, she sent me two, but one didn't glue back together. And they said they were promised to bring me another 20 or so, but their plan went to pot when this COVID come over. So, but I plan to get more in the future because I think it's a great idea. Because as you've probably seen then, the two hens, they kind of stood back at the back of the show cage, which probably Nicky's explained to everyone, whereas the grey really stands at the front and shows himself off. So I think it's a good thing going forward if we're deciding to go into new show cages. So that's my opinion. I think it's a great idea. But any questions?
Then, yeah, I was going to say, somebody asked me, I can't remember who it was now, when you're pairing up, do you take any notice of the feather, i.e. like the canary men, they pair off to yellow. Do you take into account feather when you're pairing up?
Yes, every time. You obviously do have the buff type and the yellow type. We never, very, very, very rarely, maybe on a 1% chance to try buff to buff. That's only probably due to being a love pair. We would never tactically choose to put buff to buff because it kind of wipes out your show birds. You want to breed your show birds, they're nice and stylish. Nice and stylish, especially with birds with no tails. Everyone has them. Everyone's trying to find remedies to get rid of it. But if a bird does have no tail, we pair it to a full feathered hen. 2 tails, all its lights. That's the ideal for us. We do like a lot of love pairs, but you've got to be suited feather-wise as well.
There is thought in the family, it's family, thought in the hobby that birds that are losing their tails all the time is possibly due to us giving a too higher diet of protein, so that the birds are chucking their tails to then regrow a new one. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, everyone has their own opinions on what it is and how it's caused. Some people think it's hereditary, some people don't. But you can rectify it. That's the thing. Yeah, we believe in, well, obviously speaking to various other breeders, we like to put a lot of oils in the food mixture now to keep the follicles nice and, what's the word, free, I suppose, or oiled. So there is methods to get around the tailless wonders.
Yeah.
But breeding into the right hens is critical.
Yeah. While talking about tailless wonders, you'd need, I'm presuming, you'd need to keep comprehensive records. How comprehensive are yours?
Yeah.
That was from
a lot of people do make records. Some people have a good memory towards it all. I do like the thought of, say, we do breed a tailless wonder. If the father has no tail but the mother does, then you need to lower the feather again on the next hen. It could be a really lesser hen, but that's how we do it here. Hereditary wise, I do believe myself, to a certain extent it is. But everyone has their own methods of trying to get the feather to its strongest.
All right, thank you. George wants to ask you a question about your clear bodies.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you had them up, I noticed there was a lot more grey clear bodies than there was of anything else, and I have exactly the same issue. I probably have about 70-80% grey clear bodies compared to everything else, and I much prefer the coloured one. Is that because you're pairing for the bird rather than the for the features of it rather than the colour, or because it's a specialist thing, are you breeding more for colour? Does that make sense?
Right, good question. Well, with the albinos, it's very rare we put they come into blue factor because we don't like that blue shine on the body. The blue clear bodies you can't really help popping out, but when we put our albinos to clear bodies, they tend to just produce light green, grey green, or grey. Grey being the most dominant, but I think that is due to the albinos being the grey factor series.
My Texas clear body line started. My Texas clear body line started with albinos and Texas, and I actually came away from the albinos because all of my albinos are terrible. But I'm still, 6 generations later, trying to get the grey away. I don't mind the grey Texas clear body, but I prefer the blues and violets. So I just wondered how that was, but it makes perfect sense if you're using albinos all the time and they have a lot of grey in them. So that's why that is.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's the same with the opposite colour with the green series clear body. We put them to the lutinos, so you only ever get the light green series and the grey green series. Grey greens and light greens only popping out last year for the first time because we popped them into the lutinos, which we kind of lost the greys a little bit, but we focused on putting the albinos together. So that's why we lost the grey factor. The grey factor clear bodies we had up there, they're 18 and 17 rings. I think there's only maybe 4 or 5 in the keeps flight at the moment, which are grey series, but we've purposely paired up 3 pairs of albino to clear body grey. So we know we're going to get we've already started getting a ruck full. So I'd say probably about an extra 10 up to now in round 1 between the 3 of them. So they're still babies though. So.
Okay, cool. No, thanks for that. I was just wondering. Perfect.
Right, ready for the next question?
Do you want to pass me that back on now, or?
Well, yeah. Can do, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There he goes.
Thank you, Joe. Frank.
All right, John.
Yeah, Tony Pringle asks, what varieties do you not keep, but you want to start keeping, if any?
I would like lacewing if I could get 1 or 2. I've never had a lacewing. Other than that, we don't have any recessive pieds or clear wings. No, none of these tufted or crest birds. But yeah, lacewing is something I'd like to have a little go. I think they'd work nicely with our red-eye birds as well.
Yeah.
Just to another little thing to play with. If I could get hold of one of a sort of intermediate feather, would be nice from somewhere. Yeah, we're hoping to get one later in the year, but we'll see how we go.
I'm sure if you get a nice a lesser hen to put to that massive grey cock bird, you'll soon get them up there, won't you?
Well, you never know. That grey, the best of the greys we have, I always like to pair them to sky blues. I don't want double factor grey, because no more than any other colour in the aviary, I don't want a particular colour to take over. And you can do this with grey green as well. So I like to pair grey green with sky blue and light green and dark green. We don't want double factor grey greens any more than we want double factor grey. You can get carried away with the grey factor birds that we love.
Yeah. Okay, next question is from Joe Smith, and it was to do with you talking about when you said you were cutting the spots out, and he asked, where exactly do you cut the spot or the feather? How far up do you cut it?
Well, as high up as I can, so it's not on view.
Okay.
You don't want to be able to see half of the feather.
Yeah.
So you must cut it up as high as you can.
Rightio.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. You've answered it. Thank you. Andreas has asked. We've sort of been through this a little bit, but he said he needs to know in layman's terms. Could you tell him what the difference is between inbreeding and line breeding?
In layman's terms, between inbreeding and line breeding.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we did speak on the subject earlier.
You did.
Inbreeding is simple, basically. You put fathers to daughters, mothers to sons, aunties, uncles, cousins, whatever. So that is all inbreeding. Line breeding is where you basically you have to obviously get the right birds to produce the sort of birds you want. You start with as many of these good birds visually as possible, pair them together, make sure, and they won't be related if you've bought them correctly. You make sure where you've bought them from, they're not related. When you breed the chicks from these birds, you basically, because the parents weren't related, then the chicks of other pairs are not related. So therefore you can choose to use any young bird with any of the other young birds that you've produced. And therefore you are line breeding this way. So you must basically as well keep going out and bringing outcrosses in to keep the line fresh. Because line breeding means you must keep bringing birds in, so you're not using related birds. If you've only got a small stud, this is difficult because your birds become related very quickly if you're only pairing 10, 15 pairs up. But we breed with a lot of pairs of birds, so we have no need to inbreed. Absolutely no need. We produce fabulous birds every year which are not inbred. And if I've explained myself properly, our birds are line bred, if that makes sense to you. If you've got another direction you want me to explain it to, but that's the way I explain it to you.
No, I'm sure Andreas will understand that perfectly. Just a quick one before we go into food soon. The millers come up with this lemon idea of reducing the pH in the water. Have you followed that regime?
Just lost the signal a bit, Joe.
Can you hear me now, Frank?
John, we just lost you there. If you repeat the question.
Absolutely. Can you hear me now, Frank? Can you hear me? Frank, can you hear me? Joe?
Okay. Hi, John. Just lost you for a minute. We can't quite pick you up.
I can hear you.
Just bear with us a mo.
Okay. Can everyone else hear me? George, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
I think I've got you now, John.
All right, you can hear me now, Frank, yeah?
Okay, carry on.
Thank you. Yes, I was asking about the whether you follow the miller's regime of reducing the pH with lemon juice, or did you try it?
No, we haven't. I don't really see the need to, because the purpose of doing that is for what? Making the birds more fertile or healthier, or I'm not sure why they put that in the water.
No, I can't remember off the top of my head. I just remember that they said it was good for the birds.
I think maybe the water might be different where they live to us. We don't have any problem with our water supply. And one thing I would mention to you, though, we do use just plain water in our drinkers from the tap. But when we pair the birds up for breeding, we use the Daily Essentials 1 in the water for 3 days, and then we give them fresh water again for 3 days. Now, when the chicks hatch, none of the pairs get vitamin of any kind in the water, because I believe it can be a cause of killing off the chicks. So we just use cooled boiled water until the chicks are 4 to 5 weeks of age. Now, as the bird's approaching to breed for the second round, we then introduce the Daily Essentials 1 back into the water again. So that's what we do with water. I don't mess with the water any other than that. I am not a believer in using bottled water. I do not see the point at all. I'm sorry, just wasting money. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Tony asks, how do you and Joe and maybe Carol get on? Do you agree or disagree on pairings, and how do you get over that if you do disagree?
If Joe selects a pair in the flight that he likes, he will nearly always run it by me and to agree. There's just, with me, we've got quality birds right through. It's not about quality. It's just with me, I have a thing about not pairing certain colours together. I like to make sure we're getting a good range of colours of each type coming through each year. I don't want to breed too many cobalts, or I don't want to breed an excess number of grey or grey-green. So we just try and balance things with the colours how we pair up. As I say, obviously, you wouldn't put a Lutino with a cobalt, or I wouldn't anyway. But so there's certain things that we look at. But to be honest with you, the birds we keep back for breeding, the birds that we keep back for breeding are all of a steady quality in all the varieties. But what I just check on with Joe is that we have a little check between us and make sure the birds are not related, and therefore we will go ahead and pair them up. I like Joe to make his own selections, because we both, I can't make all the selections. I like Joe to play his part, so I pick 50% of the pairs we pair up, and Joe will select 50%.
Lovely, thank you.
Carol's not involved with the pairing up of the birds.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Before we go on to the food side of things,
would you like to see our selection of normal grey birds?
Would love to, yes, please. And also, if we can see some of the progeny or grandfathers of the winning bird at the BS Club Show.
Yeah, we've got some of those out for you to look at.
Fantastic, thank you.
Pass you to Joe.
Thank you.
Right. This is probably our biggest strength throughout our stud. Obviously, winning the club show. Well, twice with the grey, which is still here. Still looking fighting fit. And he is. That's his brother in the same cage as him. He's finished, well, as a young bird, he was second in the classroom when he won young bird. And then both years as when he won best in show, he's finished fifth. He's always been that little bit behind, but he's actually never bred a bird for us. But Is just our show team grey. These are two of the sons of the club show winner. And this one, he won the CC in 2019 for the young bird. He actually developing into a super budgie. The brother, which we thought was the better budgie, he lost two of his main flights on the outside. No cysts, but just literally lost his flight. Yeah, and he actually won Best Young Bird 2 or 3 times last year. So it was a bit sad when we couldn't take him to the club show. These two greys have just finished breeding. And they've bred really, really well. These actually got no tails, these two, but those are the type of cocks we do use to the yellow feather hens. The top section is some babies that young greys that we've bred. This one was my favourite, but he's had a fight. He's a super bird. That's a hen that we were breeding with this year. She's a 20 ring, a 19 ring for her. Just to show you before, that big grey, that's his father in there with him. Same type of head. His father had 2 tails during breeding, and then he's left breeding with none. These two, the cock, he won a Best in Show last year. Cleared? Yeah, he won Cleared. The hen, she's a 2017 as well. She won Best Opposite Sex club show in 2018. Yeah. And then these are just 2 of the hens from our grey line. So this is what a cage that we had built for these type of purposes. The ideal to get Nicky's perches in there, get them closer and get rid of that shadow. So, hope you like them.
Yeah, fantastic.
So the club show winners still got all the slice. There's 2 tails. Shane, there's no club show this year to defend his title, but you never know, he could be here still next year. But his son will hopefully will be here too. Oh yeah, going back to the grey, he's actually bred 32 babies for us over the period of his lifetime. We've actually retired him now from breeding. We tried this year, we got 1 baby, but he went off. We thought we were actually going to, because he's going to pop his clogs, but that's the magic of Batral. If you're worried about your best babies, your best birds dying off, that Batral is an absolute godsend. So I advise you all to get in touch to Kevin Eatwell and see if you can squeeze some out of him, because that is magic stuff. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, just before we go on to the food, which we'll probably finish on that if we may.
Yeah.
There's a question I do like to ask, and it's not liked by most people. It's not really, it's not political or anything, but it's a hard one. And so I would ask if you think there's anything that we could do to stop what I believe is a demise in our hobby, which, because our hobby is getting, there's less and less people coming into it every year. If you look around the world, it's growing and growing in many other countries. So is there anything we can do in this country to grow our hobby?
Well, I think this is the start of it already. I know the Gwynedd group, Rob Hughes and Matt being key leaders, I think, in that. I'm sorry if I've missed any of the others, but they're the two that just sprung to mind. They do a great job yourselves. Look what you have set up here with a Zoom conference. My dad still won't know what Zoom is after this. But things like this, these will hopefully bring the hobby forward. It's difficult to say how to make improvements. I have had an idea myself of thinking about going to schools and see if they could have like an aviary visit for the kids. I don't know if that would be of an interest to the kids, just to see the younger generation obviously see a setup like this to a certain degree in other people's places. Because obviously the colours are absolutely amazing. You need the younger generation to be getting involved. That was a little idea I've had, but I wouldn't know how to put that into place. But what do you reckon? No.
It is a difficult one to know. Obviously, the Budgerigar hobby takes up a lot of your time, and it is basically something that you've got to dedicate yourself to, I think. Is this on or what? Right, can you see me? Yeah, so bringing young people in, I think everything has to be, to be a success. Like if you run a business, you have to advertise, and you have to advertise in the right sort of media. So if people are not buying cage and aviary birds, or not buying, or not joining the BS, they need to be sort of seeing the hobby in another way. Now, how I first started with budgies, I got off a bus in our local city centre, and there's a pet shop straight in front of me. And that's what got me into loving budgies, basically. When I saw them in all the different colours, I was only a young man of about 12 then, and I was fascinated by it. I think it has to be done through a media into young people, whichever way you can do that, either with Sunday paper advertising, or local paper advertising, like your local Echo papers, where parents get to read and they want to keep their children off the streets, get them involved with a hobby, and mention budgie breeding as a hobby. And it'd be something maybe that hasn't occurred to people, and go, oh, that would be a good idea, I'd like to have a go at that. You've got to put the idea into their heads, because people only join the Budgerigar Society when the idea's been there for some years sometimes, and then they branch into wanting to show the birds. But I think first of all, you've got to encourage young people to start breeding the birds in the first place. And I think you've got to put the idea in their minds through local advertising in papers. I think that's the only way you can do it, because it's too expensive to try and advertise it on a television. You could try save up, but or some way through the social media way of computers, whatever way used. But as I say, that was how I started, just getting off the bus in the city centre into the pet shop. That's what got me interested. So just getting people to look at the birds to begin with, and realising it's something they'd like to do. My dad and mum never had any interest in breeding budgies whatsoever. I had to convince them to let me build my aviary in the garden, and I got very little help. I had to virtually do it myself at a young age. But I'm a hands-on person. Okay, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely does. Thank you both for that. In fact, I think you brought up a very important point, that we are missing now the pet shops that we used to walk into and see the birds, because most pet shops don't have them anymore, but you know, that's another thing. But to finish off, I wonder if you'd go through your your feeding regime for us and show us what you feed, how, you know, as best you can, how you feed it, etc.
Okay, well, to begin with, our seed is Albert James countrywide through the Budgerigar Society. The Budgerigar Society blend seed is the one we use. I think it also helps the BS because they get a bit of a percentage out of each bag we buy, and we need to support the BS. To buy your seed anywhere else, I think does not help the BS, but I think if you can buy from the BS, we should do. Our soft food, basically, and we use the soak seed from Albert James. Are we able to show them that? Let's just show you the soak seed when it's just in a soaked sort of state, just with water on it. So next to that, to the left, is where we've got the soak seed has germinated. We've added the soft food, being Orlux egg food. We've added the various powders from NAF, which is mint, seaweed, cushionaise, ostrich, and a magic one that I think is good, Thrive. There's several of them that we put in, which is listed on the website, by the way. And then, of course, Joe will now show you a picture where the murium powder is on the top of the mix, right in the middle there. And that's just before we put the oil on it, and then we mix it all together. As I say, that's the last thing we put on. We do add sort of Kevin Bohr's product as well, which is Breed Plus and the fertility powder as well. And we add sweet corn, and we grate broccoli, whatever we've got to hand, sometimes beetroot, and that puts a final finish to it. Oh, and, well, cress, we throw in punnets out in the flights more than in the soft food. We also like to soak millet sprays. The red millet sprays is our preference. I know they're expensive, and to be honest, when Joe was little, we couldn't afford them. We only ever brought the yellow ones. They're truly an expensive item, but the red ones are far better if you can afford them. We soak them overnight in a large picnic bowl that we used to use for our picnics years ago. Soak overnight, drain them off the next morning, and that night, in most cases, they've drained off enough for us to feed them. Particularly important for your babies in your stock cages, and can be very important as well. We cut them up into the nest boxes for the babies to feed on in the box, which is getting them to wean in the box. A subject we haven't spoke about yet is our nest boxes, which is a bit unique compared to most people's. Our birds in general, when our babies are in the boxes, they are weaned in the box with the millet spray and moved from the nest box to the stock cages. We do not allow them to go on the floor because, as you know, things that happen to them when they're on the floor. But unfortunately, they climb up on each other now and again, and one does get out. But if we see them on the floor, we put them back in the nest box. We may get a picture of the nest box for you. We've got several of them right next to me, where you can see them behind. You can see them behind me. They're from top to bottom. They're 12 inches high. 10 inches deep front to back and 8 inches wide. And they have a box within that we can just take out to inspect and then slide it back in again. I believe in wooden cages. I built these myself when we moved in 30 years ago, and they're still going now. Paint them every couple of years. Wooden show cages, wooden nest boxes. There now you can see there's a stepping block as your adults drop through the main hole onto the stepping block, and you can see there the chicks are furthest away, so they're not getting stood on when the parent birds enter the hole. And there's a hole on the other side of the box just in case we manage to put the box in the wrong way round. Their parents can still get back in. And the other is just a finger hole. And that was something we hadn't done with the original ones, and made a mistake once or twice, putting the box in the wrong way round. But you learn the hard way in life. So that's, any other questions on the nest boxes from anyone?
Not at the moment. There are. I was going to try and get finished for 9:30, which is coming up now, but I have got a couple of questions that have just been put on the chat. It's a bit like karaoke, you know, towards the end of the night, everyone wants to get on and sing. It's a bit like that. They all want to put their questions on at the last minute. So if you don't
do you want me to pass you to let Joe answer a few of your questions now? Okay.
Thank you, Frank.
Just a moment.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
Yeah. Do you use apple cider vinegar?
We do not.
Sorry, say.
No.
Sounds
It's
a bit
good
low.
that the hens are doing the droppings in the box. But I'd say out of we had 177 young hens this year to go into the breeding season, and I'd say 2 of them were mucky. So we're quite lucky in that aspect, and I think that's just down to diet.
So no need. Okay.
If people are getting shitty hens in the box, then there's something wrong with your diet.
All right. Matthew's got a question about food. He wants to ask it himself.
Sorry, say it again.
Matthew, I'm not sure which Matthew it is, wants to ask. Is that Matthew McClelland wants to ask about food?
Yeah, it is.
By the way.
How long do you leave your soak seed to soak for before serving, and how long do you leave it out for? Because apparently it's kill the birds.
Right. Soak seed goes in overnight, just as we're leaving the shed. The next day we drain it, and we'll drain it in the morning, or if you forget sometimes, you can do it in the night, but it takes anywhere between 36 48 hours. So we've got a few sieves going here, because obviously the amount of birds we have here, we have to drain quite a lot. But we like it, so when we add it into the mixture bowl, that it's not sticking to your hand. The mung beans start to sprout. That's always a really good sign.
Right, thank you.
Lovely. We've got one more question, and then and that's it. And
Yeah,
this
by the
is
way.
from David Davis, and he asks, with the decline in numbers in the shows, is it now time to remove all the levels and have only junior and senior sections?
No. That's because juniors coming into the game, they need that element of success. That little challenge, and if they're getting beat by people who've been in the game for 10 years, it can be quite soul destroying. So the junior section should just definitely stay it is. I think moving the beginners has been a good idea. Novice, intermediate, they seem quite packed in numbers, in my opinion. There could be a thought process of putting them together, but I'd leave champions on their own just until people feel ready to to step up to the level. But if it's everyone's choice, if they want to step up to champion, then go for it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Right.
What more can I say? We've had a fantastic evening. I've learned a lot. I've loved every single minute of it, and I thank you very, very much for joining Dartford and giving us all your knowledge.
Yeah, well, it's in these circumstances and without the help of yourselves, with George and Tony, I'd have been lost. I've had to buy all kinds, but I wouldn't have had a clue how to set it up, so thanks to them. Thanks for the support. And I just wanted to fix one of the things my dad said before. Obviously, supporting the BS is massive, because obviously we're all involved in it. But you've got the likes of Sam Wiles there, who works his arse off. You need to be supporting the likes of him as well. I know he's just had a bit of a break in there, and it was unbelievable to see that people stepped up and got a little charity going and things like that to show you it's a strong community. So the support just flies in from everywhere when you don't think it's there. So yeah, support everyone you can. Especially the juniors.
Yes, and just to end there, talking about the juniors, Dartford, I don't know if you're aware, but Dartford has started its own junior group.
No, I went aware.
Yeah, so there is a junior group that we're going to try and build. Tony's going to spend a little bit more time on it. I don't know how. I think we've only got about 10 members. Junior members in there at the moment.
Still a lot of juniors, in my opinion.
That's going to build, and I mean that has got to be, a good way forward for the hobby. So if anybody knows of any juniors, it costs nothing to to join that group. The parents go in there as well with them, just for the safety of the child. The child can be anything from age 7 years old up to 16. So I think that's something that needs pushing. So if there's any juniors out there, get them have a word with Tony Pringle, get them in the Dartford Junior group.
Yeah, I agree.
And thank you very much again.
You're most welcome. Thanks for your time.
And it's time for good night.
Thank you very much. Brilliant.
Good night.
Brilliant evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Very welcome.